Good morning, or depending when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I've always been told I had a voice of radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game. And you're listening to PTCG Radio. Now, this week we have a tiny bit of news to start off with, but the podcast this week will be almost entirely dedicated to the newly announced rotation. I'll be taking you through all the cards that we've lost, the cards which we thought we were going to lose, but in fact we have kept in the format, and I will be looking at why Pokemon have made the rotation that they did, and why they should have listened to me and done the other rotation, because let's face it, I am nothing if not a little tiny bit egotistical, although some may argue that that's a slight understatement. But first, and just a side note, there will be no Worlds interviews this week. Now, we are getting closer and closer to Worlds. I think we've only got about 3 weeks left. So what I am going to do in terms of these interviews is try and get, 2 or 3 going the next couple of weeks. We've had a few who have still agreed to it. Luke Burke, a chap who's been playing and seen success. I believe he had a top 4 finish at Worlds in seniors a couple of years ago. So we will be chatting to a few of those who are going to be on the podcast and be lovely. But this week, it's too gosh darn important. It's going to be nothing but rotation news. And then, like I say, next week, the week after, and maybe the week after that, we'll round out with, hopefully, a fair few World interviews. Thank you very much to the couple of people, Hot Dog Hat and the lovely chap from Poker Press, who have got in touch with tips about the interviews. I very much appreciate your emails. I may not have replied to all of them, been a busy chap, but thank you very much. I really appreciate the emails, and I will be looking into following up on some of those tips. But the general feedback I've got from the interviews is that although the quality isn't perfect, it's listenable. And with the time I've got at the moment, that might have to do for the time being. But thank you to those people who have got in touch. So, in terms of news from this past week, up until today, it wasn't a huge week for news. The Mega Lucario Collection product image has been released. And the Lucario promo that comes with it is a Galaxy Holofoil reprint of the Legendary Treasures Lucario, which wasn't particularly good and hadn't seen a huge amount of play, to be honest. The Galaxy Holofoil is basically what they used to look like pre-black and white with the Diamond and Pearl days, with kind of little balls or stars or whatever you want to call it in the Holofoil. We don't do that anymore with the current promos and black and white on, but that's what they used to look like. And it's got a pretty cool statue, and it looks to have essentially just X and Y packs, although they could be placeholders, so we can't really take too much from that at the beginning. As a tiny little side note, I don't know how many of you were aware, I tell you about the promos as they come up. One thing which actually passed me by, black and white promos 77 and 78, they were kind of lost promos. They had never actually, everybody knew that 77 and 78 hadn't come out yet, but for instance, number 100, the end promo, which was given out at League, has come out, and 77 and 78 was somewhat of a mystery. Now, essentially, it's a Pikachu and a Raichu that were cancelled at the last minute, and essentially, there will always be a hole with 77 and 78. If you want to see pictures of them, you can go over to pokerbeach.com. They may even be the Pikachu and Raichu from Furious Fists, if I see properly, but I could be wrong about that. And the last little piece of news this week is the Ancient Power Box. We are going to be seeing special holo reprints of Amura and Aurorus, which is the one from Furious Fist, which reduces 20 damage, kind of like an Eviolite, to your active Pokemon with water energy on. And the Tyrant and Tyrantrum, again, both holos of them. And that's the one which does a fair amount of damage, does more, I believe, if the defending Pokemon has special energy attached to it, which a lot of them will, but it's one of those cards, it's just a little bit overpriced, and you're going to struggle to actually get it rocking. Now, maybe you could start off with the new Landorus, which attaches energy from the discard pile, I believe, which is going to be in Furious Fist, and roll into that later, but it's just not as economical as something like Lucario or Landorus EX. Admittedly, it's both a non-EX and a Stage 1, so it goes through things like that pesky Fire Lion Pyroar Majobber, and things like Sigilyph, which blocks EXs, but truth be told, it's too expensive. There are better things out there on the market. And you also get a Hollow Fossil Researcher. I mean, don't get me wrong, if you like fancy decks and you've got your heart set on a Tyrantrum or Aurora's focused deck, then you could do a lot worse. It also seems, and again these could be placeholders, it seems to come with 2 Furious Fists and 1 Flash Fire pack, and good golly, Pokemon have liked their Fs recently in their set names with Furious Fists and Flash Fire. But unless you really want to make a deck around them and you really like the bling, they're cool as a kind of going in your collection, but little more than that, I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen. So the rest of this podcast is going to be put towards the rotation, which was announced today as being Boundaries Crossed On. Now, you may have noticed, if you listen to the podcast regularly, I was very, very much expecting Plasma Storm on, and we're not getting that. We're getting Boundaries Crossed On, which means that every set starting with Boundaries Crossed and going to the most recent will be legal for tournament play, remembering of course Pokemon's rule from a couple of weeks back that sets will only now be legal if they have been released in the US for 21 days, regardless of where it may have been released in your particular home market. Obviously Japan has their own rules, but if you're in Canada, Mexico, anywhere in Europe, Africa, South America, etc., it's going to be 21 days after its US street date, not the street date in your particular country. Now, I'm going to have a look in a minute as to why Pokemon went with that particular rotation, why it makes sense and why it doesn't. But first, let's have a look through at what we're gaining and what we're losing. Now, before we get into this, a quick disclaimer. I am on my summer holidays at the moment from my job as a teacher, and I'm spending a lot of time with my girlfriend and running around doing fun things. I found out about this rotation this morning, and I've since spent an hour or two doing my research. And I've had a good look through at all of the sets which are being rotated and kept, and I've looked at what's good, what we might be losing, what's been reprinted, because there has been an awful lot of reprints over the last couple of years. And I've done my very best. But the fact of the matter is, there is an awful lot of information. I'm sitting here in front of 4 or 5 pages of notes of various degrees, so I'm not promising I'll be perfect. I've just received a tweet from Martin Cornwall reminding me that the Goldbreaker Bouffalont from Dragons Exalted has not been reprinted and we'll be losing it, and that was one I was going to miss. So I may have missed something. I may tell you about a card which has been rotated, which has been reprinted. I hope that's not the case. I've tried to be good with my research, but as always, if I've missed a card which has been rotated, or I've told you a card has been rotated which has not, tweet me at the Wassy, email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, or if you're listening on YouTube, SoundCloud, WordPress, etc., just leave a little comment down below and I will get back to you and I will correct myself on next week's podcast. But I think I've done a fairly good job. The other thing is, I've tried to keep it to cards which I have seen play semi-seriously in tournaments over the last kind of year or two. So if you've got a particular card which you use in your pet deck which you are losing, I may not be looking at it, for which my apologies. Now I'm going to go through it set by set now, but at the end we'll do a little bit of we'll kind of bring it all together, and I will look at, the top cards that we've lost, if you will. So, we are currently in Next Destinies on, so the first set we have lost is Next Destinies. And there are a few cards, potentially, that we are seeing rotated from this particular set. Now, one of the things which we have lost, or at least was in Next Destinies, is Shaymin EX. But that was reprinted in Legendary Treasures. We're also losing Kyurem EX, but that was reprinted in Legendary Treasures. We're losing Mewtwo EX. But that was reprinted in Legendary Treasures. The ones that we are actually losing, we are losing Amoonguss. Now this was the Amoonguss with the ability Spore Prize, which says when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you may use this ability. If you do, your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused and poisoned. I.e., you've got a Fungus on the bench, you evolve it to Amoonguss, and you can poison and confuse your opponent's active Pokemon. Now this was paired up with the Ninetales that did 20 damage plus 50 for each special condition for a single energy, and the loss of Amoonguss basically kills Ninetales Amoonguss stone dead. It didn't really see any play outside of that, although there were some UK players like Carl Blake who played this with Eels at the ECC back in, I believe it would have been around about 2012, I want to say. I think it was 2012. So, yeah, there was that, but it didn't see a huge amount of play. It was very much a kind of a niche deck. Even Ninetales players recently had been focusing on things like Hypnotoxic Laser and Mana, rather than actually rolling forward with Amoonguss. So we're losing it, but it's not the big loss. By the way, I'm not going to be going through today deck by deck and looking at how they're impacted. It's going to lead to too long a podcast. But what I will do over the next few weeks, running up to Worlds and beyond, is I'll be taking every deck that's even semi-playable, from Ninetales Amoonguss and Flygon Dusknoir all the way up to Plasma and Yveltal, and I'll be pointing out exactly which decks have lost what, and whether they're going to be playable next year. It's not something I've got time to do today, but along with my With Hindsight review of Furious Fist, which is coming up recently, kind of at or just after Worlds, I will be going through every deck and what it's looking like next year. What does it gain from Furious Fist, and what does it lose from rotation? The other card which we are losing entirely is Zeb Striker. Now this is another card which isn't amazing, but it saw a little bit of play. This has the attack Disconnect. Your opponent cannot play any item card from his or her hand during his or her next turn. 2 energy, 40 damage. And people like Laurent Stratton have played this with Garbodor. And certainly when I was in Spain last year, I didn't go to Worlds. When I was in Spain around about Worlds, I was considering it for this season. It was never really good enough. And let's face it, Seismitoad, DCE 30 damage and Trainer Lock is a lot better than 2 energy on a stage 1 with 90 HP. Sorry, Zeb Striker, you ain't that good. The only other 2 cards we're losing from Next Destinies are Gardevoir, and this is a card which pops up now and again. It kind of keeps coming up. You see people playing it occasionally. This is a Gardevoir that basically makes every Psychic Energy attached to your Psychic Pokemon into 2 Psychic Energy. People have played it with Mewtwo and stuff like that. It was never particularly good, but it saw a little bit of play. And the final card, or at least trainer card which is being rotated, is Regigigas EX. Now, he hasn't been good for a long time, but he holds a special place in my heart. He was part of the Mewtwo Regigigas deck where I went 6-2 and bubbled the ECC at 33rd place back in 2012. He'll always have a special place in my heart. Plus, I believe this means we will be without a playable Regigigas card. So, come on Pokemon, in that next set, the Psychic one with Gengar and all that, give us a Regigigas, would you? That would be lovely. Not even an EX, just give us a vaguely playable Regigigas. I will be a happy man. Of course, as well as it's not seeing play for a long time, it's weak to fighting, so Furious Fist would not have been kind. But we are actually losing a bunch of trainers in Next Destinies. We're losing EXP share. Now this was reprinted in Dragon Vault, but we're losing that as well. And with all the Startling, Megaphone and Tool Scrapper we've seen over the last kind of year, Experience Share hasn't seen a huge amount of play. But regardless, it's a fun little card. It basically means if your active Pokemon gets knocked out by damage, you can move a basic energy from that to one of your bench Pokemon with the EXP share on it. Now, it was very vulnerable to Tool Scrapper and Startling Megaphone. It didn't work if your Pokemon was knocked out from Poison, which happened a lot after the release of Hypnotoxic Laser. And it only worked with basic, not special energy. So it hadn't seen a lot of play recently, but it was one of those cards that had been in the format and milling around, and there was always a chance somebody was going to come and make a fun little deck with it. So I'm a little bit sad. I mean, certainly, if you were running it with something like Seismitoad, just as an example, or Trevenant or something else as Trainer Lock, you could stop your opponent using Startling Megaphone or Tool Scrapper, and that would actually allow you to still use it. So it's a card which I think breeds creativity, which I'm sad to see go. We're also losing Heavy and Level Ball. Heavy Ball allowing you to search your deck for a Pokemon with a free retreat cost or higher, and Level Ball allowing you to search your deck for a Pokemon with 90 HP or lower. These were cards that did see a lot of play, especially Level Ball, and it means we've got less Pokemon search. Less Pokemon search means less creativity, it means less consistency. I don't like losing both of these. We are losing Pokemon Center, the stadium which allows you to heal 20 damage from your bench Pokemon once per turn, from one bench Pokemon once per turn, and truth be told, it's really not the biggest loss in the world, but it saw a little bit of play. Some people will miss it. Now, Double Colourless Energy was in Next Destinies, but it's since been reprinted in Legendary Treasures and in XY, so don't worry about that. But the last two cards are probably the two biggest, and the two we're going to miss the most from Next Destinies. And they are Sky Arrow Bridge, which Virizion Genesect really relies on to make sure that you can actually retreat your Pokemon to get that turn 2 Emerald Slash, and Prism Energy, which is really, really going to hurt Plasma decks, because all they're really going to have is Rainbow Energy and Basic Energy, and then Plasma, but you know, it means you're not going to be able to run 8, 9, 10 multicolored energy anymore, as most decks did. I mean, 7 was really the minimum multicolored energy anyone would play, and that's going to hurt. That is really going to hurt. So moving into Dark Explorers then. And again, we see a similar kind of thing. Now, Empoleon was in Dark Explorers, but it has since been reprinted in Plasma Freeze as a secret rare. And the rule, for those of you that aren't familiar, is essentially, if the card has been reprinted exactly, then every version of that card is legal. With trainers, it just has to have the same name. So, for instance, Super Rod, the text isn't even vaguely familiar to the old Super Rod, but you can play the old Super Rod if you've got a reference just being a more recent version of the card to prove what it says. Whereas something like Gust of Wind and Pokemon Catcher had the exact same text, but you couldn't play them because they didn't have the same name. Super Rod had very, very different text to the old Super Rod, but you could still play it. Because the Plasma Freeze Secret Rare is an exact reprint, except for, you know, the picture, but the actual card itself is an exact reprint, that means that you can't just use a Secret Rare from Plasma Freeze, you can use a Dark Explorer's Empoleon. So Empoleon will remain. Darkrai EX was in Dark Explorers, but that was reprinted in Legendary Treasures. And Tornadus EX was in Dark Explorers, but that was reprinted as the pre-release promo card for Legendary Treasures, and that keeps it in the format. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I have really tried to do my homework this week. Now we're losing a few other cards. Now, one of the ones we're losing is Carnivine. Now, Carnivine isn't a great card, but it's one that saw a fair amount of play, so it bears having a look at. The first attack for 1 Grass Energy read, switch the defending Pokemon with one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. The new defending Pokemon is now poisoned. I.e., it was a Pokemon Catcher, or a Lysandra nowadays, not Lysander, which left the new defending Pokemon poisoned. It saw a little bit of play, especially in Trainer Lock decks, but we don't have Trainer Lock from the bench anymore, so it's not really a big deal losing that. One really big loss, though, and this is a very big loss, we are losing the Deck and Cover Excelgor. That is being rotated. That is the one which, for a double colourless energy, allows you to paralyze and poison the defending Pokemon and do 50 damage, and you shuffle Excelgor, Shelmet, and the DCE, and any other cards attached to it, back into your deck. This was seen a lot with things like Gothitelle last season, but as recently as US Nationals, Henry Pryor took Flygon Dusknoir Excelgor all the way to top 8 of US Nationals. So, quite frankly, this was a very, very good card, and it was a card that saw play, and it's a card people are going to miss. So, sorry Excelgor, we shall miss ye. Now, we are losing Entei EX, who kind of sucks, but we've really not been doing very well with Fire EXs. You know, we had Heatran, Moltres, Reshiram. I mean, Fire EXs have not been kind to us. Entei, it did win Canadian Nationals last year or the year before, Quad Entei, but that was about it. It really wasn't particularly great. We're losing Heatmore, which was the humorously printed direct counter to Noble Victories Durant, but as Durant has also been rotated, nobody really cares. Now, now, the next few that we're losing, the next two, I suppose, are another cards which I kind of would like to have in the format, because they're not really broken, but they have the opportunity to be good in the right hand. We're losing Kyogre EX, which had the lovely Dual Splash attack, 2 water and a colourless, did 50 to 2 of your opponent's Pokémon, benched or active. And that saw a little bit of play, especially in the Kling Klang deck, which John Roberts III, or second, or something along those lines, won US Nationals with back in 2012. So it has seen a little bit of play. It was a cool little card, and we'll be sad to see it go. The next one we're losing, and this is another card that saw a little bit of play, Espeon. Now, Evolutions could see some play next year, especially with that funky Eevee, which I believe does allow turn 1 evolutions now, where you attach a basic energy and it evolves up. And the Espeon had the ability Solar Revelation that prevented all effects of your opponent's attacks, except damage, done to each of your Pokemon that has any energy attached to it. So it did things like, Excelgor would do 50 damage to your active Pokemon, but it wouldn't paralyze and poison. It was played as a direct counter to, I believe it was Excelgor in the Vileplume, etc. deck, back a couple of years ago, and Stefan Tobacco, when he grinded into Worlds in 2012 with CMT, played a 1-1 Espeon line, and then annoyingly didn't play against any of these, Excelgor decks. I went with the whole not teching an Espeon, and then in Worlds I faced 2 of them, but hey ho, what can you do? So, we're losing it, it's not the end of the world. There is one other Pokemon that is being rotated though, and this is absolutely huge. It's from Dark Explorers, it's the only one I haven't mentioned, so you probably guessed, it's Sableye. And this is a big loss to Dark decks. It's got Junk Hunt, which allows you to take 2 trainer cards at your discard pile. This has seen a lot of play, and I mean a lot of play, ever since it was released. So this will be a big loss. A lot of players will be mourning the loss of Sableye. Not quite to the level of Claydol and Uxie when they got rotated, but still, we are going to miss it. I'm not, but some people are. And again, in terms of trainers, we're losing a few of them as well. Now, we're only actually losing 2. We're losing Enhanced Hammer, which kind of sucks because Special Energy will continue to be a big source of kind of acceleration for decks. People are going to keep playing it, especially DCE and Strong Energy after Furious Fist drops. And Enhanced Hammer was always a good way to slow them down. We've still got Crushing Hammer due to its reprint in Legendary Treasures, but that's on a coin flip. Enhanced Hammer, people will miss it. Again, that was a fun little disruptive card, which I think we're going to miss. And the other card we're losing, and this is bigger even than Sableye, is Dark Patch. Now, I'm going to look at Yveltal decks in a lot of detail in the coming weeks, and whether they can survive without Sableye and Dark Patch, but Dark Patch is a huge loss. How many times have you been playing against decks that have gone, Dark Patch, Dowser Machine, Dark Patch, and then gotten a Darkrai or a 4 or 5 energy Yveltal out of nowhere? It happens a lot more than we might think it would. Dark Patch is going to be a huge loss. Again, not to me. I never really got on with Dark decks. I played them occasionally, not to a huge amount of success. They were never really my kind of deck. But other people will miss them. And they're the only really 2 trainers we're losing from Dark Explorers. N, curiously, got reprinted as a promo card when it was released as a League promo recently. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But N was reprinted as Black and White Promo 100, and I don't know if I've mentioned yet, but it's Black and White Promos 55 and up, which will remain legal, and that means that N, due to its reprint as Promo 100, will remain in the format. Professor Juniper has been reprinted in both Plasma Blast and in Plasma Freeze as a full art. And, although not exactly the same card, we got Professor Sycamore, I believe, in X and Y, so there's essentially 3 other versions of that card. Random Receiver was reprinted in Plasma Freeze as a secret rare, so again, all versions of that will remain playable. Rare Candy was reprinted in Plasma Blast, and Ultra Ball was reprinted in Plasma Blast and Flash Fire, and as a secret rare in Plasma Freeze, so 3 of the last 5 sets. So Ultra Ball and Rare Candy will very much remain in the format. Moving into Dragon Vault, this is being rotated and it's really not a huge deal. Although we're losing Experience Share, which you've already mentioned, but we're also losing Super Rod. And this is actually a bigger deal than a lot of people realise. Now, we're still going to have Sacred Ash, the trainer from Flashfire, which allows us to put 5 Pokémon from our discard pile back into our deck, but we're not going to be able to recover that energy. And certainly when I played a deck like Flareon, I loved Super Rod. Because the fact of the matter is, some decks you don't play enough energy, but you rely on being able to Super Rod it back in. Things like the Empoleon deck, which won Senior US Nationals this year, played 2 Super Rod. And that was partly to get Pokemon back, but also it allowed that deck to play a whopping 6 energy. It is actually going to be quite a loss, shall we say. People are going to miss Super Rod. And the final set which is being rotated out is Dragons Exalted. And we're losing more. Now, I did get a few tweets from people based on these saying we're not losing a huge amount. And we're only losing a few big cards like Dark Patch and Sableye, but we're losing a lot of little cards. So here's what we've got from Dragons Exalted. First, as before, let's look at the cards which we're not losing because they've been reprinted. The Ninetales that has a Bright Look ability, just like Lysandra or Pokemon Catcher, without the flip. And the attack which does 20 damage plus 50 for each special condition for 1 fire. That was reprinted as a promo. It's staying. Mew EX was reprinted in Radiant Collection, which is part of Legendary Treasures. Sigilif, the one with the Safeguard ability, was reprinted in Legendary Treasures and was a secret rare in Plasma Freeze. The Shadow Steel Driftblim was reprinted as a promo, so that's staying. Stunfisk was reprinted in Legendary Treasures. Garchomp was reprinted in Legendary Treasures and as a secret rare in Plasma Freeze. Altaria was reprinted in Boundaries Crossed as a secret rare. And Hydreigon was reprinted in Legendary Treasures. Although, as a side note, with losing Dark Patch, Hydreigon as a Stage 2 and without Dark Patch is as good as rotated. Now, I don't see why you wouldn't play Aromatisse. Yes, Hydreigon has a decent attack, which with a Bangle does 172 EXs, so it can one-hit EXs, blah, blah, blah. And, of course, it's much beefier, but it's a Stage 2 and we don't have Dark Patch. You're much better using Aromatisse, and then you can use a Xerneas with Fairy Energy to move all of that around. So, Hydreigon isn't rotated, but it might as well be. So let's see the Pokemon that we're missing. First of all, we are losing Roserade, which is still a card which, especially in a deck like, let's say, Virizion Genesect, has still seen some play even very recently. And this is the one with the ability which basically allows you to search your deck for any one card and put it in your hand when you evolve up to Roserade. It's a lovely consistency crutch. It's a card I've used in the past. Again, it's a card that does nothing really but add consistency. I'm sad to see it go. We're also losing Ho-Oh EX, which did have its spot in the sun. It was, for a little while, a very, very good card. I think it was around about Cities last year. It saw a huge amount of play. Since then, it's not seen anywhere near as much play, but for instance, there were people still playing at US Nationals to some degree of success. This was the one where, if it was in the discard pile, you flip a coin. If heads, you can put it on your bench with up to 3 different types of basic energy, depending on how many were in the discard. And then it did 20 damage, plus 20 for each different type of basic energy attached to it. So in theory, you can go from having no attacker to having Ho-Oh hitting for 80, or even 100 if you can get a 4th energy from your hand of a different type, with just a flip of a coin. You would then pair that with things like Energy Switch to get the energy off of Ho-Oh and onto other stuff. I played this for a while in an almost mono fighting deck, just because I love fighting decks, as a lot of people that know me will be able to attest. So that was pretty cool for Ho-Oh. But it's gone now, so what can we do? Terrakion EX is another one we're losing. I'm kind of a little bit sad about this, because I kind of think that Terrakion EX, it always had a big problem if it took too much energy. And it's weak to grass, which is not good with Virizion Genesect. But for instance, Tamal Cameron played it this season, as did a few other people in the UK and the US and probably in other places, with Victini to accelerate energy onto it. And certainly the new Landorus from Furious Fist, which I've already mentioned today, which allows you to attach energy from your discard pile, would have been pretty good at getting him going. And he had the attack, which for free energy did 90 damage and allowed you to attach 2 basic energy cards from your hand to your bench Pokemon in any way that you like. It was always a little bit slow and a little bit arduous to actually get it going, but it was a card that I liked, and especially with a new set coming out, it had potential. It also didn't have a 1 energy attack, so Landorus EX and Lucario EX, they're going to be better, quite frankly. Now we're losing Aggron, which is another card which never really was as good as it maybe could have been, but it was played enough that I think some people are going to miss it. This had the ability Toppling Wind, and essentially, when you evolve to Aggron, you can discard the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. It did make top 8 at... it was one of the regionals this past year, and it wasn't great. But it was used, and it was inventive, and it led to some nice rogues. And the penultimate one, which we're going to have a look at today, which we're losing, is Registeel EX. Again, a Pokemon which was never really that great, but it had a fun attack triple laser for free colourless energy that did 30 damage to 3 of your opponent's Pokemon. It was really good when we had both of the Klinklangs, the Plasma one which blocked damage to your metal Pokemon from EXs, and the one which allowed you to move your energy around, which was rotated last year. Since then, it's not been so good. We've only had the one Klinklang, but it's seen play with that Klinklang, so it's another card which I'll be sad to see go personally. I just don't like the Reggies. In fact, I'm not sure any of the Reggies are going to be legal nowadays. Pokemon need to get onto that. We need more Reggies in this game. And the last Pokemon, and this is one of the biggest losses we're getting from this particular rotation, and that's Bufalon, the one with Goldbreaker, the one which I just kind of naturally assumed had been reprinted, but it hasn't, unless I've missed something. It's got the attack for free energy, Goldbreaker, which does 120 damage to an EX, and then you put a Muscle Band and a Verbank Laser, and that's 170. Or you put a Silver Bangle and a Laser Verbank, and that's 180, although because Muscle Band is so good against non-EXs, or on-EXs, most people will play Muscle Band over Bangle nowadays. And this was really good at making the prize trade go in your favour, and it was another thing that Evil Tau decks did like to play, and which Evil Tau decks will be losing with this particular rotation. So, yeah, Bufalon's gone. And we're losing a few trainers in Dragons Exalted. Now, we're losing Giant Cape, but we've still got Eviolite from Plasma Storm, so it's not the end of the world. It's not quite as good, because things like Poison go through Eviolite, but you'll still get the extra 20 from Giant Cape. And we're losing Tool Scrapper, but Startling Megaphone is 90% of the time better anyway. But we're losing Devolution Spray, which again was better with things like Aggron and Amoonguss, which are being rotated anyway. Although we're still keeping Ninetales. You know, the coming into play ability, so you can kind of devolve and then evolve to use the ability a second time. But it's still kind of a little bit of a loss. And we're losing Blend Energy, which sucks, because we're also losing Prism Energy. And going back to Plasma, or even something like Aromatisse, and now you've only got those 4 Rainbow. Now, obviously, Blend was never good for the Fairy decks, like Aromatisse, because it was before Fairy Energy, so Fairy Energy was never on there, so you could never move it around. But still, something like Plasma, having neither Blend nor Prism, means you've only got those 4 Rainbow. Now, some people won't think this is a big deal, but one thing you will see happening with Furious Fist is Mewtwo is going to come back in a big way. Because fighting's going to be good, especially Lucario. And Lucario's weak to Psychic, which makes Mewtwo good, which means Mewtwo Wars are going to come back. And if you're playing Plasma, Deoxys is your answer in Mewtwo Wars. But if you're only playing 4 Prism, you're not going to be able to play basic Psychic Energy as well as basic Lightning, basic Water, etc. What this means is you are only going to have, and I know that Blend, you know, the Lightning and the Water for Thundurus and Kyurem was not the same one as the Psychic for Deoxys, but you're losing Prism. So what this basically means is you've only got those 4 Rainbow to fuel Deoxys, and that's going to hurt. Not to mention, of course, that if you put that Rainbow on Deoxys, that brings it down to 160, so Mewtwo will be KOing you, or a second Mewtwo, will be KOing you with just a DCE without needing the Muscle Band or the Laser that they would otherwise need to bring up to the 170. What that really means is that whereas Plasma decks used to be quite good against Mewtwo, they will now be much, much worse against Mewtwo. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is everything as far as I'm concerned that we're losing. Outside of the promos, we'll get to them in a second. But what I want to do very quickly is have a look at Boundaries Crossed. Because Boundaries Crossed, I was expecting to lose. I was expecting Plasma Storm on. And a lot of other people were expecting Plasma Storm on. So what I want to do quickly now is stop and have a quick look at Boundaries Crossed to see what we've gained by having Boundaries Crossed being kept in the format. Now, just as a side note, Secret Rare Terrakion was in Boundaries Crossed, but that was in Legendary Treasures. Switch was in Boundaries Crossed, and we were almost in a situation where Switch was rotated, which I don't think has ever been the case in the history of the game. But we had the Kalos starter sets released a little while ago. That was the one where you would use it to teach a friend how to play, and you got two 30-card decks and a little rule book and such. And I believe it was Sylveon and Noivern or something like that, I forget exactly. But it doesn't matter, because Switch was in the Kalos starter set, so even if Boundaries Crossed had been rotated, we'd still have Switch. Caldeo EX was reprinted in Legendary Treasures, and Dusknoir was a secret rare in Plasma Blast. So regardless, we would have kept Terrakion, Switch, Dusknoir and Caldeo EX. But there's a few more we're keeping. We're keeping Mana. That's the one, Long Distance Hypnosis, which, on a flip of a coin, if heads, puts your opponent's active Pokemon asleep, if tails, puts your active Pokemon asleep. And you would use this with something like Caldeo, so if you put yourself asleep, you could just reset it with a Rush-In Retreat. Or you would use it in something like Virizion Genesect as a little tech, because you've got Virizion out, you can't be put to sleep. We are also keeping Flygon, which was the one from the Flygon Dusknoir deck. So we're actually keeping Flygon and Dusknoir. We are losing Level Ball, which sucks. Super Rod that sucks. Excelgor, which sucks. But we're actually keeping Flygon Dusknoir, so maybe someone's going to make that work. Who knows? There is a chance. Why not? Donphan Flygon Dusknoir. Good work. We're also keeping Aldino. Aldino is the card which allows you to discard it with its Busybody attack, and then that takes away, I believe, 10 damage and 1 special condition on your active Pokemon. It's kind of cool. People have used it in the past. But the big thing we're keeping here is Landorus EX. That he is going to be an absolute beast when Furious Fist drops, because we've got Strong Energy coming out, which will add 20 damage, and we've got Fighting Stadium coming out and all of that stuff. He's just going to be an absolute beast. He's going to be paired with Lucario, and he is going to be great. He's going to be really, really good. Now, in terms of trainers, there's 2 really good ones we're keeping and a few meh ones. Oh, as a side note, we're keeping Altaria because it was a secret rare. We're keeping Aspertia City Gym, adds 20 HP to colourless Pokemon, and things like Tornadus that has a fighting resistance. That's going to be kind of cool, because that might be a nice counter to these fighting decks, and Aspertia City Gym will counter Fighting Stadium as well as adding 20 HP to your Tornadus. And then you can put something like an Eviolite on there to help even more. Potion is staying around. It's weird that we might have had Potion rotated. Rocky Helmet is staying around. The tool which allows you to do 20 damage to the defending Pokemon when they attack you. But I suppose they'd be the attacking Pokemon, but let's ignore that. But to be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, there are so many better tools. If you're playing that, I would worry for you, quite frankly. We are also keeping Town Map, which some people have been playing. Lets you put your prizes face up. Very good with Dusknoir, which we're keeping. We are keeping Gold Potion, the Ace Spec, which allows you to heal 90 from your active, or from one of your Pokemon, I forget exactly. People have used this. It's one of those ones that kind of comes out every so often, and it's just kind of cool, to be honest with you. It's not amazing, but every so often someone will use it, and people go, oh, that's kind of cool. So we're keeping that, and I suppose that's a good thing. Just as a quick side note, Gold Potion only works on the active, not on the bench. I've just looked it up. We also keep Bianca, which I suppose is a good thing. But there are 2 we are keeping which are huge. Firstly, we are keeping Skylar. I'll talk more about this in a minute. But we're keeping Skylar, and that's good because that is a supporter that we all like, that we all use, that adds consistency, and it would have been rotated. And finally, we're keeping Computer Search. Essentially, we're keeping all the ace specs, but Computer Search was a huge supporter which we were potentially going to lose. And Computer Search allows us to do things like search for a DCE on turn 1, and we can Skylar for Computer Search for a DCE on turn 1. It's huge, it's brilliant, whoop whoop, let's get in there, etc. And finally, let's have a quick look at the promo. So up to 55 or 54 and below have been rotated out, and there really isn't much we're losing. Did I mention Rayquaza EX? I cannot remember for the life of me if I mentioned Rayquaza EX. I think I might have forgotten despite it being on my list. So let's just very quickly say that Rayquaza EX was in Dragons Exalted, and it has been rotated, and it hasn't been reprinted, at least not in anything that hasn't been also rotated. So Emble Rayquaza, just dead. We've still got Emble because it was reprinted in Legendary Treasures, but Rayquaza is gone. Emble Rayquaza is officially dead. I think I forgot that one. But he's dead. There we go. Sorted. So, up to 55, Flygon, but Boundaries Crossed is still in, so we keep it. Mewtwo and Darkrai promos have been rotated, but they're in Legendary Treasures, so they stay in. Altaria was a promo that's been rotated, but the Secret Rare was in Boundaries Crossed, so it stayed in. The only two we've lost are Rayquaza EX and, hugely, Tropical Beach, which is another thing that Flygon Dustin was going to lose, incidentally. Tropical Beach has gone. It has been rotated. I believe it was numbers 28 and 50. 55 and on are staying legal. There is no Tropical Beach. Tropical Beach is dead. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. It's gone, and it ain't coming back. We're going to have to live with this. Tropical Beach is gone. It has been rotated. There's nothing we can do about it. Sorry about that. Tropical Beach, boom, gone, dead. Sorry. So, yeah. Don't be expecting to be playing with that anytime soon. And that's really the only one we're losing other than Rayquaza. What are we keeping from 55 on? Well, it's all things I've mentioned, except for one. But just quickly, Caldeo EX, Shadow Steel Drifblim, Bright Look Ninetales, all the Plasma EXs, but they're in Plasma Free, so we don't really care. Tornadus EX, N, and Champions Festival are the promos of note which are kept in. So, just looking down the list then, what have we really lost? Because I've gone through what I consider to be everything of note. Let's just go through the big things just to kind of round up and finish off here. In Next Destinies, we lost Heavy Ball, Level Ball, Sky Arrow Bridge, and Prism Energy. I don't think we lost any Pokemon of note, but we lost Heavy Ball, Level Ball, Sky Arrow Bridge, and Prism Energy. They're the big ones. From Dark Explorers, we lost Sableye, Dark Patch, Excelgor, and Enhanced Hammer. They were the four big cards we lost from Dark Explorers. Excelgor, Sableye, Dark Patch, and Enhanced Hammer. From Dragon Ball, we lost Super Rod, and you could argue Experience Chair. And from Dragons Exalted, the really big ones we lost were Bouffalont, Rayquaza EX, and Blend Energy. So when you look at it like that, as the big ones that we've lost, there really isn't very many. We've got 4 in Next Destinies, Experience as Heavy Ball, Level Ball, Skyro Bridge, and Prism Energy. We've got 4 in Dark Explorers, Sableye, Excelgor, Dark Patch, Enhanced Hammer to bring us up to 8. 1 in Dragon Ball, Super Rod brings us up to 9. And then Dragons Exalted, we've got Rayquaza EX and Bouffalont and Blend Energy, which brings us up to 12. Oh, and then you add in Tropical Beach from the promos, and that basically makes, to my mind, 13 genuinely good cards rotated. And a bunch of others which have been played, have seen success, have potential, etc. But to be honest, there are only 13 what I would call big cards that have been rotated. Now, some people will disagree with me on this, and I'm absolutely fine with that. Some people will consider cards I've not named in my top 13 to be really big rotated cards. Other people are going to look at cards like, I don't know, let's say Enhanced Hammer or, and say that they're all Level Ball, Heavy Ball, and say they're not that big. I disagree, they're the 13 big ones. So the thing I want to finish off talking about today is why Boundaries Crossed on. Now, I said Plasma Storm on. That's what I thought they would do, and there were reasons for this. Firstly, a couple of years ago, Pokemon came out and said, we want to rotate 4 sets. Now, I suppose technically they have, with Next Destinies, Dark Explorers, Dragons Exalted, and Dragon Bolt, but as Dark Explorers was a set of like 20 cards, it was only released as a free pack blisters, I don't think that counts, so I expected the 4 sets to be Next Destinies, Dark Explorers, Dragons Exalted, Boundaries Crossed, boom, start with Plasma Storm. And of course, Plasma Storm was the start of the X and Y block, or the Plasma block if you call it. It wasn't the X and Y block, it was the Plasma block, the start of the Plasma cards, so that makes sense to kind of start it there. But the other thing, and this is really weird, recently, and I've alluded to this a couple times in the podcast already, recently we had a couple of promos that were released. N and Skylar were released as promos for leagues. And N was printed as Black and White Promo 100. Skylar was printed with its Boundaries Cross number. And it was printed as a Boundaries Cross card, not as a promo card, which is really weird to me. Because surely either they're both promos, or they're both just reprints of the actual card. And what I assumed was the reason for this was, they're going to rotate to Boundaries Cross, to Plasma Storm on. And they want, because that would have rotated both N and Skylar. So Pokemon basically said, look, we want N, it's a good card, it's a comeback card, it's good early game, it's got some skill to it, blah, blah, blah. We don't want Skylar for whatever reason, despite it being good. So if we print N as a promo, Skylar is just a Boundaries Cross reprint. That means that when we rotate to Plasma Storm on, we lose Skylar, keep N sorted. The fact that they've rotated Boundaries Crossed on means that Skylar stays in the format anyway. So I don't see the point of printing N as a promo and Skylar as a Boundaries Cross card, and then just keeping Skylar in anyway. That makes no sense to me. So why would we go Boundaries Crossed on? Well, somebody pointed out to me on Twitter, and I'm afraid it was a little while ago, so I can't find the tweet offhand, but whoever it was, thank you very much, it was a very intelligent point. They basically said, well, hang on a second, wasn't Boundaries Crossed the start of the Black and White 2 block? Now, I didn't really consider Black and White 2 to be a block per se. As far as I'm concerned, we went straight from the kind of Black and White block up to the Plasma block, up to the X and Y block. But he makes a good point. Maybe Pokemon consider that to be the Black and White 2 block, essentially, or at least, you know, the only set from Black and White 2, or whatever you want to call it, and they wanted to keep it in. I think there's a much simpler explanation for that, and that is Ace Specs. Boundaries Crossed was the first set where we had Ace Specs. So essentially, by keeping Boundaries Crossed in the format, we get to keep all of our Ace Specs. Whereas otherwise, we would have kept things like Dowsing Machine, Scramble Switch, Scoop Up Cyclone, Master Ball, etc. But we'd have lost Computer Search. And truth be told, that's about the only one we would have lost. But that's not the point. Oh, and Gold Potion, I suppose you could argue we lost. So, by going Boundaries Crossed on, we actually keep all of the A-Spec cards, now every A-Spec, and especially for new trainers, that could be very confusing. Oh yeah, no, all of those A-Specs are legal. Oh, except for those two. And I know we've got the Black and White Kyurem ones, they suck, I'm not talking about them, I'm not even looking at them. So, that's essentially it. That's the rotation, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I've been thorough enough. I hope I haven't missed anything. I hope I haven't made any mistakes. But having said that, on my Professor Cup YouTube video recently, I went and put the Holo Rare Furfrou as one of the cards to watch, which was just silly. So I may have made a silly mistake. If I have, you know what to do. And of course, to keep going with my weekly plug of my YouTube channel, it's growing quite nicely. I'm getting new subscribers every week, but ladies and gentlemen, I am a greedy man. I want more. I've been gaining a couple new subscribers a day. I'm up to 337. That's lovely. That's not nearly enough. I want to get up to a couple of thousand. What we've seen going up in the past week is we've seen rounds 3, 4 and 5 of the Professor Cup Rules Tournament, which I played in Sutton Coldfield recently. Going up very soon, we will have one of the top 4 games from that tournament and the final from that tournament, so you can see the good decks at 1 out, rather than my 3-2 disappointment Solrock Lunatone deck. I'm also going to be putting up a deck breakdown of Evil Tau Garbodor, which I haven't done yet, using Denise Van Wyck's, sorry for some pronunciation, Belgian Nationals winning deck, along with my first games from that. And then I've got 3 very interesting games which came from the Wakefield winner box, and including in that you're going to see a very weird deck which had an outrage for 120 on turn 2, just to whet your appetite, as well as a junior at 301 playing our national champion, also at 301, and a speed Charizard deck. So some very interesting games coming up. They are the next kind of 8 or so videos going up on the YouTube channel. More will be added all the time. Get yourself over there and subscribe. You can find it at youtube.com/user/PTCGRadio, or just search PTCG Radio on YouTube. You'll find it quickly enough. I'm going to leave you now. I hope I've answered all your questions. Tweet me at the Wassy, email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, or just comment if you're listening on YouTube, etc. All the usual rules apply. If I've missed anything, or if you just want to add something to the discussion, maybe there's a card which you thought I should have talked about that I didn't. Until then, thank you very much for listening. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio.